Welcome to Curriculum Assessment and Technology lesson topic, Teacher as Researcher, using assessment data to inform practice. As the classroom curriculum proceeds and at certain assessment junctures, the teacher may have cause to ask, why did students not make the required learning gains? In simple terms, a process of diagnostics is required. The concept is concerned with an examination of the remedial teaching strategy for that group of students. The challenge is to ensure that this knowledge base is expansive yet specific and useful enough to deal with all emergent school, classroom and teacher-specific issues. In this lesson, we will cover learning outcomes, what is the concept of teacher as researcher, definition of research, what does it mean to be a teacher researcher, insight into how teachers can use various research findings to enhance teaching and learning in their classrooms, revision and focus on developing teacher as researcher capabilities, summary and tutorial questions. Learning outcomes. After completing this lesson, you will be able to explain ways in which teacher-based research is informing the work of the teacher and teaching. Explain meanings of conducting research in schools and classrooms as a teacher. And explain logistics of conducting research in a classroom. What is the concept of teacher as researcher? An approach is required to enable the teaching profession to grow in overall professional knowledge. This involved process is known as research, and the teacher as researcher is one such strategy. Evidence-based practices have their genesis in research. In examining this concept, we aim to highlight the various sources of learning and teacher-based data can play in enabling the teacher to improve their teaching capacities, the learning outcomes of their students, and the contribution it has on the overall growth and development of the teaching profession. Teachers can improve their pedagogical work and their professional standing and capacities in society by pursuing and engaging in research-based agendas. Having a portfolio of research-based skills is essential for professional activity and growth in the knowledge economy. The teacher as researcher is concerned with examining in practical detail the analysis of data in classrooms. Definition of research. The word research usually refers to the seeking of knowledge or the truth about something. Thinking about a phenomenon, distilling a question that lies at its heart and that seeks to answer, to remedy or better understand that phenomenon is a way of understanding what is meant by research. In a formal sense, research refers to the systematic investigation to establish the veracity of something and is a search for knowledge that involves inquiry. Research is about finding out and not about particular advocacy of a particular line or position. Research is carried out according to procedural criteria. Arguments about research are settled by engaging with the theory to show that it is or is not coherent and credible, and arguments about how the data were identified, collected, and interpreted. Central to the research process is the collection and examination of data. The parallel to the assessment process is apparent. The process of research, with its focus on data and inquiry, expands the scope and usefulness of collected data and increases the teaching potentials of the teacher. What does it mean to be a teacher researcher? Teacher research is a characteristic of modern teaching work. Teacher research is essentially an insider view directed at local, specialised problems and issues. For the teacher, this means a focus on questions about their teaching performance, their student learning outcomes, and exploration of their classroom environment. A classroom curriculum built on design questions, such as the learning management design process, skills in research approaches, and data that lie beyond the classroom, are an important extension to traditional professional activities. Research can be understood as both basic and applied, as long as it is systematic, directed towards a more complete knowledge or understanding of the subject studied, and has impact in the field. Basic research's main motivation is to expand knowledge, not to create or invent something new. By contrast, applied research is designed to solve practical problems in a context. Research, either basic or applied, is necessary in order to make progress in a field of knowledge. Teachers undertake research when they have a question or a problem that requires a solution. By knowing what relevant research is suggested, undertaking a rigorous scrutiny of their work, and adopting processes of inquiry, teachers can develop more effective ways of achieving valued outcomes. Teacher as researcher involves systematic, intentional, and self-critical inquiry about their work in formal educational settings. In summary, the process of researching can be best understood as a process that enables the teacher to seek the answer to a stated problem or question about an occurrence or an outcome in their classroom or professional environment. Now we will gain some insight into how teachers can use various research findings to enhance teaching and learning in their classrooms. What is clinical research? In a practical sense, clinical, classroom and school-based research is concerned with interrogating collected data, most common in classrooms and schools, by way of student assessment, and applying qualitative or quantitative methods to ascertain the extent of learning gains or otherwise, trends and overall performance anomalies. Qualitative research is especially effective in obtaining culturally specific information about the values, opinions, behaviours and social contexts of particular populations. Its value in informing learning outcomes from a pedagogic performance perspective is limited because of its focus on the subject's valuing and otherwise circumstance. By contrast, quantitative research is all about qualifying relationships between variables. The quantifiable attributes of this method enables classroom, school or school system performance targets and benchmarks to be established, and in turn enables learning-based monitoring and comparison activities to be conducted by the teacher, principal or schooling system. This process is fundamental to teaching improvement as it focuses the teacher on what's not working, the scope of the deficiencies or otherwise, and provides a set of standards for what should be aimed for and achieved. What is professional learning and application? PLA is the most common approach to research used by the teaching profession. It can be best understood as the application of research findings if someone external to the classroom does clinical research and writes it up in journals, books, or as teaching resource materials for generic teacher reference. Works by Hattie, 2009, and Marzano, 1996, are examples of such resource packages. Professional learning and application follows the process of 1. The teacher collects specific classroom data, for example assessment results, 2. And identifies an aspect of the school or classroom curriculum that is diminished, for example learning failure or other related circumstances identified, using the learning diagnostics process. 3. The teacher seeks out professional reading or in-service, for example write-ups, focused on referenced specifically to a classroom-based problem or question. And 4, then uses findings from such write-ups to assist the teacher in processing their data and or referencing remedial actions. 5. The classroom curriculum through LMDP is then revisited. The teachers establish capacities to assess and collect learning-based performance data on their students is the starting point for teacher as researcher. Engagement with research methods and the subsequent analysis of such results focused on key or core issues and at key junctures in the school year is a professional value adding that enables objective and deep pedagogic performance issues to be identified and resolved at their root cause. Common to both the clinical research process and PLA is the notion of collecting and interrogating data. Data can be broadly defined as a collection of facts from which conclusions may be drawn, and it can be classified as being raw or cooked. Raw indicating the data has not been processed by any statistical method, whereas cooked indicates that it has been processed, that is, extracted, organised, and perhaps analysed and presented for further use. The process of interrogating data so as to find out things about a phenomena or occurrence leads to cooked data. It is at the cooked stage that the results of such a process can be used to make comparisons, determine trends, benchmark or focus further inquiry work. In all cases, the initial problem or question is the chief guide. Data can be classified as useful or not useful for teaching purposes, and it is these two concepts that must be explored if the teacher is to successfully utilize the processes of further explanation. Learning management is defined as knowledge and skills capacities that enables the teacher to achieve learning outcomes in all students. What the teacher does through teaching makes fundamental differences in the learning outcomes of all students. The key question is how a teacher does this. Revision and focus on developing teacher as researcher capabilities. Highlighting the processes available to guide the teacher and the role that research engagement can play in achieving such teaching and learning goals is focused around two important dimensions. Firstly, having a reliable set of learning performance data, for example, the product of classroom assessment regimes. The learning management design process is used by teachers to design the most appropriate teaching response. For example, the classroom curriculum becomes a plan for teaching. Secondly, a set of teaching capabilities that enable the teacher to make appropriate and responsive teaching design decisions. Learning diagnostics will locate and remediate learning failures. The key message is that the answers to each design and diagnostic question are enmeshed in a process of research, and the classroom assessment regime is the source of such data. Classroom data can be broadly classified as information, assessment data, or performance evidence. Each increases the scope of the teacher's analysis of data and the application of potential findings. In summary, data collected without the influence and guidance of achievement outcomes, information, is of little constructive use in the modern-day classroom. While it can provide context, its use has little potency in professional teaching contexts. Assessment data, compiled and presented in the context of the teacher's classroom curriculum, where learning outcomes are key, is useful in a formative and summative teaching and reporting context, but of limited use if the teaching professional growth and development is a requisite, or the teacher has to enact a process of diagnostics. This is because the collected data is not referenced to external benchmarks and performative indicators, and therefore subject to the teacher and their prejudiced views of learning performance in their classroom. From a teacher as research perspective, assessment data presented as performance evidence provides a more robust and reliable basis from which to make professional judgments and to objectively answer classroom and school-based learning problems and questions of significance. Teacher as researcher is an articulation of a set of higher-order professional skills that enable the teacher to identify solutions and to answer questions in relation to learning and classroom-based problems. The chief goal in the teacher as researcher agenda is for the teacher to improve their teaching performance and enhance the learning outcomes of all students. The status of teacher and the premise of school renewal are captured in such processes. And finally, in this lesson, there are 3 tutorial questions for you to consider and answer. Firstly, how does teacher-based research inform the work of the teacher and teaching? Secondly, what does it mean to conduct research in schools and classrooms as a teacher? And thirdly, what are the logistics of conducting research in a classroom? Excellence is not a skill, it is an attitude.